Pope Francis has distinguished his papacy with a profound engagement with indigenous peoples worldwide. His actions and words signal a significant shift in the Catholic Church's approach, moving towards reconciliation, respect, and recognition of indigenous rights and wisdom. To understand this shift, we must examine the historical context and the actions of previous popes. The Catholic Church's relationship with indigenous communities has a long and complex history, often intertwined with colonialism. While Pope John Paul II tried to engage with indigenous cultures and acknowledge past wrongs, the Doctrine of Discovery remained unaddressed. He visited indigenous communities and expressed respect for their traditions, but the legal and historical frameworks that justified colonization were not explicitly challenged. Pope Benedict XVI continued some of these engagements, but did not take significant steps toward repudiating the Doctrine of Discovery or delivering formal apologies for the Church's role in residential schools. His papacy focused on continuity and theological reflection, and while he acknowledged social issues, the specific focus on indigenous rights was less pronounced than under Pope Francis. Then came Pope Francis. His approach has been markedly different. On March 30th, 2023, he officially repudiated the Doctrine of Discovery, a set of 15th century papal ideas that justified the colonization of indigenous lands. This doctrine had served as the legal foundation for colonial claims over indigenous lands, with far-reaching consequences that continue to impact indigenous communities today. This was a historic moment, representing a clear break from past justifications of colonial practices. The Vatican statement not only rejected the doctrine, but also apologized for historical atrocities carried out by Christians, and affirmed the rights and cultural values of indigenous peoples. In July 2022, during his penitential pilgrimage to Canada, Pope Francis formally apologized for the Catholic Church's role in the residential school system. This system forcibly separated approximately 150,000 indigenous children from their families, with more than 60% of the schools run by the Catholic Church. Standing before residential school survivors, Pope Francis expressed profound sorrow for the deplorable conduct of those members of the Catholic Church. I ask for God's forgiveness, and I want to say to you with all my heart, I am very sorry. He acknowledged the suffering, hardship, discrimination, and various forms of abuse experienced in the residential schools, describing it as chilling to think of determined efforts to instill a sense of inferiority, to rob people of their cultural identity, to sever their roots. Responses to Pope Francis's apologies have been mixed among indigenous communities. Some survivors expressed appreciation for his words. Pita Irnik described Francis as a man of peace, a man of compassion, and a man of love for all people of the world. Former National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Phil Fontaine, noted that the Pope's apology helped make reconciliation easier for some survivors. However, others felt the apology fell short, with some critics expressing disappointment that Francis didn't explicitly name the crimes and abuses committed. Others emphasized that while words were necessary, they needed to be followed by concrete actions, and ongoing commitment to reconciliation efforts. Pope Francis's advocacy extends beyond apologies. In February 2025, at the 7th Indigenous Peoples Forum, he emphasized that Indigenous peoples have the right to preserve their identity, noting that the defense of the right to preserve one's culture and identity requires the recognition of the value of their contribution to society, as well as the safeguarding of their existence and the natural resources essential for their livelihood. He has consistently recognized the value of Indigenous cultures and traditions. His advocacy includes recognizing Indigenous people's special relationship with land, water, and food. He has repeatedly emphasized that land, water, and food are not mere commodities, but the very foundation of life and the bond of Indigenous peoples with nature. The Pope has expressed grave concern about threats to these rights, stating that they are seriously threatened by the growth of the grabbing of arable land by multinational corporations, large investors, and states. Pope Francis has acknowledged Indigenous peoples' crucial role in protecting the environment and addressing the climate crisis. He has called for joint actions and dialogue to transform the historical relations marked by colonialism, exclusion, and discrimination. He has encouraged learning from Indigenous communities and returning to practices that respect a world in harmony with the beauty and goodness that guided God's hands in creating it. The 2025 Indigenous Peoples Forum focused on Indigenous peoples' right to self-determination, a pathway for food security and sovereignty, reflecting the growing recognition of Indigenous peoples' right to determine their futures. While papal apologies and statements represent necessary steps, Indigenous leaders have emphasized the need for ongoing commitment to reconciliation. Concrete actions have been called for, including the repatriation of sacred artifacts held by the Vatican. Pope Francis's engagement with Indigenous peoples represents a significant departure from the Church's historical approach. The path from words to actions remains challenging, requiring sustained commitment. Recognizing Indigenous self-determination, cultural rights, and environmental stewardship offers a foundation for continued reconciliation and healing. Pope Francis has left us, but he has left us an example. He pointed out new courses that the interaction between the Catholic Church and the Indigenous peoples can take. Indigenous peoples will always remember him for that.